Good evening, friends. Thank you for yet another day with you. We'll be looking at the topic today, the impact of war on global economy. The impact of war on global economy. For some days now, we have been up on the news what has been happening between Ukraine and Russia. We've been hearing a lot of uh, analysts speaking from both sides, from the part of the Ukraine and the part of the Russians, and all manner of issues are springing up from that invasion from Russia. But what has this got to do with global economy? If you look at Russia very well, makes Russia one of the superpower outside that it has more welfare, more sophisticated military warfare over so many nations, they equally have a viable economy. Russia has a viable economy. Russia, it's one of the highest producer of oil, and globally, it's one of the highest producer of energy. Gas and crude oil and agriculture too. They are one of the highest in terms of uh, export of agricultural produce in the world. So equally Ukraine. Ukraine equally have what they export out of the countries, like the the Ukraine produces wheat, and just like Russia, they produces over 40% of 10% of 20% of global uh, consumption of wheat. So if you look at what that is telling you, it tells you that there's a lot to do when it comes to agriculture from those two nations. So agriculture alone, exporting over 20% of what the world is eating when it comes to wheat. When we talk about wheat, pastries, and all of you that uses all manner of does all manner of activities using the wheat to make production, you quite understand that this is going to affect the cost of wheat. So all those factors with the increase in the barrel price of crude oil that has caused the market to skyrocket from $78 to $80 to $120 per barrel right now, it tells you that a lot is happening within the scope of the global economy. So friends, even if you look at what's happening within the Euro USD or the US dollar as against other pairs, it shows you that there's a lot of plunge in the exchange rates, and that is really affecting other viable economies like the US economy. Like if you look at what's going on in US currently, it's the impact of the war is causing shortage in the supply of gas in both Europe and America. So this such shortage of gas supply to Europe and America, it's causing an increase, an inflation of cost of price of things there in Europe and America. So friends, this alone is a massive concern. It's a great concern. If this war lingers, if this dispute between Russia and Ukraine lingers, it's going to amount to a very devastating effect. It's going to have a very ripple effect to nations who do not have a viable GDP. So like Africa, for instance, Nigeria, as the case may be, it's a country that depends solely on imported products. Yes, we might say that the increase in barrel price of petroleum product is going to favor the country in a way whereby we are going to export more crude oil because other nations like Ukraine and Russia are not exporting. We have cost to export more and have more money to the nation. But what happens to when we have to import back to the country? The cost of importing back white product to the country, like those who export crude oil and import white product to the country, it tells you that definitely there will be increase in the cost of energy in no time, in a very short time, if the war lingers. So this alone is telling you that there is a red line between what is happening now and what's going to happen in no time. So the global economy is having it that if the war between Ukraine and Russia persists certainly nations are going to suffer. We are just coming out from the COVID. Nations are still struggling how to come out of a recession. So with this coming up again, it tells us that there's a lot of impending danger that is going to be inflict to countries like us that are solely depending on all these nations for importation. You quite agree that 60 to 80% of most of the products that is coming into Africa and Nigeria, precisely, it's from Europe and America. So when we look at the cost of production in Europe and America increasing by, let's say, 30 to 40%, it's going to affect the cost of what we are importing. So invariably, we have a situation whereby the nation is going to go to, let's say, 2 to 3% of 2 to 10 to 15% increase in inflation, certainly. Because if we look at what's going on right now between Ukraine and Russia, supply of gas has been cut off. So that alone is giving us a very great production for Nigeria. At the same time, it's not a good one. Come to think of what's happening right now in the area of the oil and gas sector, where we're having shortage of supply across the country. Abuja, for instance, is almost turning into something else when it comes to supply of crude oil, of white products across the country, across Abuja. So this tells us that this is not really good for the global economy. For you to look at what's happening within the FX market, the foreign exchange market, it tells you us again that in no time, the exchange of dollar to other currencies is going to be weakened. So what is the way out of this? What is the solution of this? How can countries begin to remedy from this? Yes, some are beginning to leverage from this opportunity, like countries like Russia, like China, countries like India, countries like North Korea. They are beginning to see how they can plug in to this opportunity. It is not the best opportunity when it comes to war, but that is where nations, great nations, strive when it comes to things like this. All right. So what is our country doing? What is Nigeria doing in situation that arises in times like this? What are we doing as a nation? What are we intending to do to see that we avert this impending economic implication that is coming to Africa? Leaders can't just fold their hands and sit and expect that magic will happen. No, certainly the tides have changed. Importation or export of technological materials into Africa is going to be weakened. It's going to be shortened. Why? Because these countries that are producing, certainly they are going to be affected. These countries that are exporting, certainly it's going to affect them. So what are we then doing? So what is African leaders then doing concerning this issue? Friends, this is a food for thought. I just came around to say, let's think about what could this Harvard economic downtime turn out to be if our leaders do not sit up. If the war between Ukraine and Russia persists, what are we going to do as a country? Are we going to fold our hands and watch the economy suffer further? Because the economy is already in a state of total dilapidation. So what do we do as a nation? How do we come out from these pitfalls? Friends, that is what we need to think. How can you, as a person, begin to tie up your bets, begin to look at other ways, other avenues, to ensure that this pending inflation do not take on you unaware? Certainly it's going to come. The inflation is already in 2 digits. So what happens if it increases further? So that is what I've come to inform us today, come to share with us. Please do well to understand that times have changed. The global economy has changed. It is pointing to one thing. All these blueprints, all these indications are pointing to one thing, that the tide have gradually changed. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for having me. And I pray that we continue to discuss other economic matters some other time. God bless you.